BYU. This is an interesting one to talk about them all because 84, Lavell Edwards. Have you guys ever driven through Provo? It's the stadium's right there, right in campus. It's actually quite beautiful with the mountains in the background. Lavell Edwards Stadium was there for 30 years. It was quarterback McMahon, Steve Young, Mark Wilson. Ty Detmer won the Heisman. Amal and I remember very much all of Ty Detmer's career. But in 84, when they won that national championship, that capped a 24-game win streak, just to give you an idea of how prolific this BYU program was back in the day. Also, instigators, Lavell, I can't remember the assistant on his staff that kind of started the West Coast offense.
Norm Chow.
That is now so prevalent across football. And it's BYU who also low-key have been successful. 16 winning seasons in the last 17. Think about that, fellas. That's pretty good. 17 bowl appearances in the last 18 years. This is a program that's done very, very well. Kalani Sitake took over for, was it Bronco Mendenhall? And he's in Sitake's in his 8th year, 8-5 last year. But they move as an independent to the Big 12. So the schedule is going to be a bit of a step up. But this is just to start with an overview on BYU, this is a different type of school. Obviously, the Mormonism and what do they call them? Not adventures that these kids go on.
So they go on a 2-year mission, yeah.
Missions, pardon me. But it's also an international fan base. I don't think people realize in the States that BYU is big all over the country because of its denomination. And you'll often see so many players from like Hawaii and certain regions of the world because they're BYU. It's a very unique program, and it's what makes college football pretty cool. You know what used to make college football pretty cool? Conferences. Anyway, they move away from being an independent, so they get that Big 12 schedule. It's going to be a bit of a step up. 8 wins last year. The win total set at 5.5 in the regular season over at DraftKings. I'll let you run with BYU.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you mentioned Kalani Sitake. He's been there for a while now. He's a defensive guy, and the one thing that surprised me last year, BYU ranked 97th in scoring defense, giving up almost 30 points per game. You wouldn't expect that out of the Cougars with Sitake on that side of the ball. They've got to get better there. This is a team that averaged slightly over 30 points per game. But you mentioned the challenging schedule is going to change because, first of all, they open with Sam Houston. If you're not familiar with the Bearcats, this is a good football team. They're going to be a challenge. They get Southern Utah. They go at Arkansas, return trip from the game last year. Not an easy schedule. I don't know how they're going to do this year in the league, but I think they're going to be towards the bottom half of the league. 7 starters back on defense, just 4 on the offensive side of the ball, Patrick. Keaton Slovis, if that name rings a bell, he is probably going to be the starting quarterback here. Remember, he played at USC, transferred over to Pittsburgh. He's been around a little bit, so expect Keaton Slovis to potentially get the start there under center. But we've seen some good talented players. This is a program that's had a history of great quarterbacks. You talked about it. Aiden Robbins comes in, transfer from UNLV in Louisville. They've got a lot of things they've got to work out. Offensive line traditionally has been good with the Cougars. 3 replacements come in terms of transfers on the O-line. So some concerns there as well for this team. I don't know if BYU could realistically get back to where they were at one point in time. But this program will always be consistent. They're going to play hard. You mentioned it. Guys go on 2-year missions. They come back a little bit more mature. They've got guys that are 22 to 25 on their roster many times. This is a program that will give you some tough games. I just don't know, stepping into the Big 12, if they've got the skill to match the Texas, the Oklahomas, and some of the other programs in that league. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But you mentioned going to Provo. I've never been to Provo, but every time I watch a game there, I'm like, that's one of those 5 stadiums that I'd love to visit and see a game at.
Yeah, it's just I haven't been inside, but electric from the outside. Keaton Slovis, as you mentioned, absolutely will be the starter. He's got great wide receivers, Keanu Hill and Cody Epps and Chase Roberts. So he's got skill. Isaac Rex, the transfer, there's skill. The tight end. Jared Hall, if that name rings a bell, he was a quarterback last year. You're going to see him tonight playing for Minnesota. Didn't he get drafted by Minnesota? I believe he did. The BYU quarterback from last year. The offense wasn't the issue last year, big guy. 31 points per, as Amal mentioned. It was the defense. Now, they've transferred and hit the portal hard, but that was and Sitake does focus on D. That was a very mediocre defense last year. Dustin, the win total set at 5.5 for BYU.
Yeah, I mean, and you got Arkansas at Arkansas as an out-of-conference game this year. Like, that is a tough one. The thing about BYU is, to me, I said this with a couple teams yesterday. They're less a team I think about in terms of futures and more a team that I'll find a reason to back during the season. Because a lot of these guys are older, if you have a team that they're facing that's super hot and super trendy, I like to back a team like BYU to cover against a superior program. Like, I'm going to be intrigued when they play Texas. Curious what the line will be on October 28th. Matchups like that, where I think a veteran stoic team led by a very stoic head coach in Sataki, who I like a lot, I don't know if it's good enough to compete week in and week out once that Big 12 schedule hits. I mean, Kansas is different than they're used to seeing now. It's not like the old Kansas before Leopold got there. They've got to deal with teams like Cincinnati, who enters the Big 12 with them. Like, it's gonna be a grind for this group.
6 wins is a lot. Yeah, I would agree.
I can't look at the total.
I thought it was.
I would agree.
It was 6 is the number. I thought, okay, someplace I saw
5-0, 5.5. But if you want to go over, you got to get to 6.
I got to be honest, guys. I would go under here. I look at the schedule, going at Texas, at Morgantown. Can you imagine flying from Provo, but Salt Lake City to Morgantown? Not an easy trip. Dustin mentioned at Arkansas. You've got to go to TCU. The game in Lawrence will not be the gimme that it used to be at one point in time. You close out in Stillwater.
It's an uphill battle year one.
Yeah, guys, I think this team is going to be at about 3 to 4 victories. 5 is an optimistic number. I think 5.5 is just a reputation number here on BYU, who, as you alluded to, 16 out of the last 17 years winning seasons, Patrick. I just don't see it. I think this is going to be an under 500 year for the Cougs.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.